BBC News, the headlines at midnight. Up to 400,000 secret American military files about the Iraq War are published.
From CBS News World Headquarters.
It is a leak that is more like a flood. Hundreds of thousands of secret U.S. military documents from the Iraq War released today by the website Wikileaks.
The first casualty of war is the truth. But the attack on the truth by war begins long before war starts and continues long after a war ends.
In 2010, Wikileaks, a whistleblowing website, took the media landscape by storm and infuriated governments by publishing classified information.
We should condemn in the most clear terms the disclosure...
In the United States, Julian Assange, the site's founder, became public enemy number one.
Well, I think Assange should be assassinated, actually.
This is me here, grabbing the boy and running with the boy. When the video came out and they realized that I was the soldier on the ground in that video, then everybody wanted to talk to me.
WikiLeaks claims to offer a channel to expose government secrets and lies. But can the disclosures be trusted?
It's funny, some small incidents get huge write-ups and some big ones not at all.
It's the base ingredient for any investigation, but it is the start, it is not the conclusion.
The White House blasting the release of over 90,000 U.S. military records on the war in Afghanistan.
And who exactly is Assange? What is behind WikiLeaks? This is the story of a 21st century phenomenon that no one saw coming. Getting inside WikiLeaks isn't easy. In London, the organisation has set a base inside the offices of the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, a non-profit organisation. In fact, each of their temporary operating centres is carefully hidden from prying eyes. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange seems to nurture an aura of secrecy about the structure of the company and its locations.
WikiLeaks exists in a virtual space and obviously also in real spaces. We're a multinational organisation, so we have technical infrastructure, financial infrastructure, and people all over the world. But we don't have, our locations listed publicly. There's very good reasons for that.
WikiLeaks was launched in 2006. Hackers and political activists appear to be the driving force behind the site. Daniel Domscheit-Berg of the Chaos Computer Club in Berlin was a co-founder with Assange.
In some way, I assume I can be called a hacker. A hacker is anyone who is interested in bringing change to a system, and that's certainly part of what I'm doing.
Do you own a mobile phone?
I have many mobile phones, but there's security procedures you have to go through to prevent mobile phones being used to tracking you. Those procedures are known to intelligence agencies, or drug dealers and so on. Investigative journalists should look more about what drug dealers and intelligence agencies do to protect themselves.
Armed with just a few computers, the small group of young programmers and journalists have become a modern myth and the nemesis of some of the world's most powerful governments.
Hi guys, good afternoon.
The disclosures of hundreds of thousands of classified documents relating to the war in Iraq and in Afghanistan have outraged the United States Department of Defense.
But us. We want whatever they have returned to us, and we want whatever copies they have expunged, erased, gone.
The Pentagon has sent a warning to WikiLeaks. via a press conference.
We are asking them to do the right thing. We are asking them to return stolen property. If doing the right thing is not good enough for them, then we will figure out what other alternatives we have to compel them to do the right thing.
The WikiLeaks legend owes its genesis to the war in Iraq. In a US Army base, just like this one, 65 kilometers from Baghdad, a young GI was classifying military intelligence in a computer. They were incident reports and video filmed by the combat troops. His role meant that not only did he have access to restrictive documents, but that he was also exposed to the war's daily brutality. Reports of friendly fire and of deaths of civilians were part of his routine. The anonymous GI came across a video taken from an Apache helicopter showing a military engagement unfold in the streets of Baghdad. The evidence before his eyes seemed to indicate proof of a war crime.
Clear.
The soldier disobeyed orders and made a CD-ROM of the video. If caught, he would be court-martialed for this treason. An IT fanatic, the GI was already aware of WikiLeaks. The website's reputation was good for offering potential whistleblowers a safe platform and for daring to publish what the mainstream media would censor. The soldier sent the video to the site.
We have an anonymous safe harbor, so we accept these documents anonymously. We have very strong mechanisms to protect the sources that we have, and we provide mechanisms.
Daniel Domscheit-Berg was one of the hackers who helped build the unique WikiLeaks site.
It was built in a way that whistleblowers remain anonymous to the project itself. So whenever something was received, it was not clear where it came from. So the whistleblower should feel secure in a way that if he feels something should be out in the public, there is not an instance that is then judging about his feelings.
Can open courtyard.
For Assange and his team, it proved difficult to tell what was actually happening in the video sent by the soldier.
When I first saw it, actually it didn't have that much impact on me. Because I didn't know where it was, when it was, what was the circumstances, who were these people.
So they had it deciphered. What it allegedly revealed would send shockwaves throughout the world.
It was only by following the path through the thing and seeing how relaxed and sort of innocent most of the people were in the video that the carnage then became so outrageous.
And WikiLeaks would receive praise and condemnation for making the video public. After receiving a video allegedly showing a war crime in Iraq, the WikiLeaks team needed to decipher it. In early 2010, they traveled to Iceland, the country in the process of establishing a law to protect sources and whistleblowers. They teamed up with investigative journalist Kristin Hansen, who used to work for the Icelandic state television. Together they set up a base in an unassuming house that quickly acquired a military nickname.
The curtains were drawn and people tried to keep a low profile. I don't think that the owners of the house knew anything what was going on there. People used to call it the bunker, you know, because people were bunkered in and stayed there for quite a long time.
The video was filmed in July 2007 from an Apache helicopter as it hovered over a district of Baghdad. In the streets below, the US infantry would soon make an appearance, and the helicopter acted as aerial surveillance and escort. The video shows that the camera suddenly focused in on a group of Iraqis. Two of them were carrying weapons. One of the crew is heard asking base command for permission to open fire.
It's actually quite complex to understand, and so I could see that, oh, it's incredible there's some kind of slaughter here, but once I started discovering more and more detail, this is when it became more emotional. So to understand that, yes, this person was a journalist for Reuters, and this was a driver from Reuters.
Among the victims, WikiLeaks identified 40-year-old Saeed Shmarg, a local guide and driver, and 22-year-old Namir Noor Eldin, a Reuters photographer.
The helicopter pilot obviously sees Namir and Saeed as insurgent, and instantly decides that the cameras are weapons.
An RPG. All right, we got a guy with an RPG. I'm gonna fire.
An RPG is, probably 5 times longer than a Canon with a 200 or 300 millimeter lens.
Firing.
But this is what death sentence, basically, for those guys.
Light them all up. Come on, fire. Hey, Roger. Keep shooting. Keep shooting. All right. I hit him. Oh yeah, look at those dead bastards.
Former member of Bravo 216, Ethan McCord, witnessed the shooting from the ground. In his opinion, the opening salvos were justified.
Right here, there's a man standing there with an RPG. There was no RPG round, it was just the RPG. Another man over here has an AK-47. I can understand the viewpoint of the Apache pilot to fire on the group of men, because the screen that they're looking on in that Apache is very small, black and white. So they're making war judgments in the fog of war. The Apaches are approximately 1.5 miles away from where these men are gathering on the ground.
A few minutes after the first tragic incident, the events turned into what is allegedly a war crime. A black van is seen pulling up to help the injured. Inside it, no insurgents, but a family, including 2 children. The pilots claimed that there was an imminent threat and are heard asking for permission to start firing again.
Bookmaster 7, Roger. This is Bookmaster 7, Roger. Engage. Come on. Clear. Clear.
The film shows bodies strewn everywhere, and then the first US ground troops arrive. Ethan McCord was among the squad that is seen on the video.
So this is me here. I was one of about 6 who were dismounted at the time, running up onto the scene.
Stunned by what he saw, McCord took several photographs.
It was shocking. I had never seen anything like that before. I saw on the corner what appeared to have been 3 men. They were completely destroyed by the 30 millimeter rounds. The rounds are in a 30 millimeter are like that big. They contain depleted uranium. It almost, to me, didn't seem real. It kind of seemed like something that you would see out of a bad horror movie.
McCord didn't realize the extent of the bloodshed until he approached the van. Inside, the 2 children, a 4-year-old girl and a 10-year-old boy, lay badly injured.
I took the picture of the boy in the van. I originally thought that the boy was deceased because he had a wound to the right side of his head and he wasn't moving. And when I went back out to the van, he made like a labored breath movement. And that's when I started screaming that the boy's alive, the boy's alive. And I grabbed him, started running him to the Bradley, which is now. At this point, he looks up at me, and I look down at him, and I told him, it's going to be okay. I have you, don't worry. It's going to be okay. And his eyes rolled back into his head, and at that point, I thought that he possibly had just died in my arms. After this day, I couldn't justify what I was doing in Iraq anymore. I became very angry with the war, the death and destruction of innocent people. That's not what I joined the military for.
WikiLeaks released the classified US Army video on the 5th of April 2010. The same day, in Baghdad, the victims' families watched it on the internet. The father who was driving the van died. The two children miraculously survived.
Well, again, good afternoon to you. In America today, we are dealing with some newly released and extraordinarily graphic combat video of brutal...
I had just got done dropping my kids off at school back in April 2010. I went home, grabbed a cup of coffee, sat down on the couch, and turned on the news, and there I was running across the screen of my own television, carrying a child. I knew immediately what it was, and it actually felt like a huge slap in the face. I had spent so much time trying to forget that incident, and then here it was being pushed in my face again.
McCord left the Army in 2009 due to injuries. He is now an anti-war activist.
I wasn't perceiving that it would affect the soldiers when they saw the ground troops, when they saw themselves in the video. 4 have become conscientious objectors, public conscientious objectors of that unit of, I'm not sure how many, 22 or something.
A month after the video was posted on WikiLeaks, the American Army arrested a soldier in Baghdad. Not the crew responsible for firing on civilians, but the man who they suspected of leaking the video. His name is Bradley Manning.
Bradley Manning is a young 22-year-old Army intelligence specialist, only a couple of years in the Army. He felt that there were operations going on. He felt that there had been civilian deaths and other things about war that the American people and that the world should know about.
Manning was betrayed to the FBI by former hacker Adrian Lamo. The two young men knew each other and used to chat on the internet. Naively, in one of their exchanges, Manning confided to him. He wrote, "It was forwarded to WikiLeaks, and God knows what happens now. Hopefully worldwide discussion, debates and reforms. If not, then we're doomed." After alerting the FBI, Lamo attended a hackers convention. Seen as an informant by some fellow programmers, he received a mixed reception.
Private First Class Manning was doing, which is acting one's conscience. In that case, I felt compelled. Compelled, I don't believe, is too strong a word.
I can't say whether Bradley Manning is the source or not, or friends of his, or whatever. He is galvanizing the US anti-war movement. He is becoming a centralizer that pulls everyone together, some central figure others can rally around.
Manning's arrest has antagonized part of the US population. A minority is calling for the young soldier's release, whilst a majority is condemning Manning's actions. The most conservative commentators have strong views.
There are traitors in America. Whoever leaked all those documents to the WikiLeaks website is a traitor and should be executed or put in prison for life.
And I think anything less than execution is too kind a penalty.
Manning could face up to 52 years in prison if found guilty of high treason. He's been charged with disclosure of classified information, including the helicopter video. WikiLeaks had made its name. With fame came a large increase in the financing of the site.
WikiLeaks is financed by contributions from private people, $200,000 for operational costs.
Did you have a salary?
No, I have never received a salary. I have invested around 30,000 euros into this project from my savings. All my life savings went into this project.
By May 2010, WikiLeaks had shared its hackers' past to become a big player in the media world. In July 2010, WikiLeaks was ready to unleash another storm.
Whistleblowing website Wikileaks does it again. Last time it was Iraq, this time it's Afghanistan.
Our top story this morning, the White House blasting the release of over 90,000 U.S. military records on the war in Afghanistan.
This time, WikiLeaks was not alone in releasing the documents. The former hackers were now working alongside three major media outlets: the New York Times, Der Spiegel, and The Guardian. As internationally renowned publications, they gave added weight to WikiLeaks documents.
So this is The Guardian from this morning, 14 pages about this topic. Also concurrently in Der Spiegel, 17 pages.
At a press conference, Assange gave an assured performance in front of the cameras.
The real story of this material is that it's war. It's one damn thing after another.
Trying to understand how WikiLeaks, a media newcomer in trouble with the Pentagon, could form an alliance with three of the most respected newspapers in the world is not simple.
One of my colleagues went over and tracked down Julian Assange in Brussels at the time and sat down with him, and Assange told him that WikiLeaks was proposing to publish a huge quantity of material about Afghanistan, dump it all at once on the internet in the way that WikiLeaks does. And we persuaded him that this wasn't such a good idea, and it would be a better idea if he let mainstream organizations like us see the material first and work on it.
Julian Assange sees things somewhat differently.
The Guardian likes to take credit for more than it has done. It has done very good work in producing those 14 pages. It was not an innovation by The Guardian for this organisation to deal with the mainstream press anyway whatsoever. We've been doing that for years.
Okay, because he told us that he had to convince WikiLeaks to collaborate with the mainstream media.
Absolutely false.
WikiLeaks markets itself, if you like, as a countercultural phenomenon, something that is an alternative to the mainstream press. They used to see themselves as hackers, really, with an ideology that they were going to overthrow capitalism, I think. Now they've started to talk about themselves as being publishers.
Headquarters were set up at the Guardian offices in London to sift through and analyse the leaked documents. Journalists from the States and Germany were called.
I was sent over from the New York Times here in Washington in early June to help review what the Guardian had, what had come from WikiLeaks.
We set up a secret office on the 4th floor of this building that nobody else was allowed in. And we had this kind of little international bunker, or war room.
And essentially what we found were there were some 92,000 documents. These are incident logs, war reports in Afghanistan and to some parts along the Afghan-Pakistan border.
And we did a lot of work on going through these logs, trying to decode them. A lot of them were written in an almost impenetrable military jargon, full of abbreviations and acronyms.
The journalists from the New York Times uncovered Secret Service reports that focus on Pakistan, a key US ally in the region. There, in black and white, the intelligence reports seemed to confirm what had previously only been rumored, that Pakistan is in fact Washington's worst enemy. The facts were given full coverage in the media.
One of the main findings that we came up with these documents was that the Pakistani Military and Intelligence Service, the ISI, very closely supports some of the Taliban and other insurgent activities in Afghanistan as a way of keeping the coalition forces off balance there.
The content of the dispatches was such that the New York Times felt obliged to speak with the most senior administration officials in Washington.
We basically went to the White House and said, we have had access to these 92,000 classified documents, military documents from the war in Afghanistan. WikiLeaks intends to put these out publicly. We have had access to them for the last few weeks, and we feel we've done a responsible job at filtering them, and we are not going to publish all these documents. We asked the White House, do you have any objections? Because you need to raise them now before we publish. And the White House then went back to the Pentagon and to the CIA, and they eventually came back with a few very small changes in requests.
US officials turned down several requests for interviews for this program, stating they had nothing new to add to the official condemnation of WikiLeaks disclosures. The leaked documents included the names of Iraqi and Afghan individuals who were working with or for the US Army on the ground, translators and guides, for example. To the insurgents, these people are traitors, and their faces are covered during operations. Naming them put them at great risk. WikiLeaks came under attack again. For the first time, supporters criticized them.
We wrote them an open letter saying we thought it was irresponsible to publish these official documents without editing. It was in the public interest to make these cables known, but they should have first ensured that the names of Afghan civilians were not published or made accessible.
The letter was used in a virulent campaign against WikiLeaks. The credibility of the site was put into question, so Reporters Without Borders decided to backpedal.
Now, here's your Pentagon Channel report.
Secretary of Defense Robert Gates and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Admiral Mike Mullen are speaking out about the WikiLeaks case.
Good afternoon.
The Pentagon officials went as far as to describe WikiLeaks as a criminal organization.
The battlefield consequences of the release of these documents are potentially severe and dangerous.
Mr. Assange can say whatever he likes about the greater good he thinks he and his source are doing, but the truth is they might already have on their hands the blood of some young soldier or that of an Afghan family.
It was, of course, unfortunate that some names were actually published there. But it has been overplayed quite a bit with very dramatic and ridiculous words from Pentagon that WikiLeaks might have blood on its hand. And that coming from, organization which have, quite a bit of blood on its hands is almost hypocritical.
With their last revelation, WikiLeaks had attracted criticisms from all sides. Their next disclosure was unveiled in London. In October 2010, they called a news conference and invited the cream of the media to attend. After lying low for a few weeks, Assange took to the stage to announce revelations about the war in Iraq. He clearly enjoyed being in the limelight.
This is warlogs.wikileaks.org. It is the interface to explore and analyze.
But tensions within WikiLeaks started to appear. Assange was reproached for going against the organization's ethics.
Julian's approach was to just rush things and to blast out those few big leaks.
And concentrate only on those leaks.
Yes, because they're what gives you most popularity, and that's not the approach. I'm not into being popular. It was a right approach if you want to build a personality, if you want to become, Time Magazine Man of the Year or something like this, but it's not the right approach in respect to the ideals of this organization.
I
Has Sweden been okay.
Once again, the revelations made banner headlines in the media. They included thousands of US Army internal memos and mission reports. The bulk of it was being decoded at the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, the Wikileaks base in London.
This is a collection of all sort of 390,000 reports pulled into one database. This is 6 years of the US military in Iraq from their view. So this is what they were saying internally. It's quite it's unique.
Researchers uncovered evidence that contradicts the official version of events.
I mean, one of the reasons the US say they went to war was to prevent Al-Qaeda kind of growing. Al-Qaeda, for about first 3 years of the reports, not mentioned at all.
As a justification of their presence in Iraq, the US officials state the ongoing operations against Al-Qaeda's foreign recruits. But a different picture emerged. Secret Service documents reveal that the war is mostly conducted against Iraqi insurgents, often Shiite nationalists, armed by Iran. Soon, the Shiite militias began to attack the Sunnis. The civil war span out of control. The conflict became ever more deadly. WikiLeaks found another partner, the newspaper Le Monde. After the United States, Britain and Germany, the French press entered the ring. Assange's empire was getting bigger.
They are not journalists in the classic sense, so they need us. They are intermediaries rather than mediators, but intermediaries who play a crucial role. Our job is to evaluate the information, to analyze and dissect it, to decode and decipher it, and that's what our small team did.
Two specialists on Iraq pored over the documents to judge just how far they shed light on recent events.
It's simply the story of things that go bad during military occupations, wherever they might be.
The limitations of the WikiLeaks documents is that in a lot of their reports, soldiers don't always tell the truth. They change the facts about missions. This is the main weakness. They show a daily routine as seen by the military, but it's not always the reality about the war in Iraq.
So what's in there needs to be put into perspective. There are a lot of gaps, things missing. Unfortunately.
Basically, when you have all those documents, what you are seeing is what the eyes of the US Army see. If the eyes are misled or if they're blind, then the information will be false.
That's correct. That's right. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have value. There may be, there may have been some report that happened, presumably there was some intelligence investigation as to why this happened. Some other detail
that you don't have.
You don't have some other long, detailed thing produced by CIA or something. Just like all statements by all people, you have to see what their motivation is in amplifying some things and restricting others. It's the base ingredient for any investigation, but it is the start. It is not the conclusion.
The Iraq War Diaries exposed WikiLeaks' limitations. The disclosures could only reveal what the US Army wanted to see.
And now, prepare for the next installment. WikiLeaks about to rock the US government again.
A Fox News alert, the United States now scrambling, doing damage control. WikiLeaks exposing...
In November 2010, WikiLeaks struck again. Hundreds of thousands of diplomatic cables were handed over to their partners, which now included the Spanish daily El País. They were confidential messages between Washington and its embassies around the world. US diplomacy was being stripped bare to the embarrassment of the White House.
All right, here's a question for you. Should the WikiLeaks website be labeled a, quote, terrorist organization?
In the United States, the latest revelations provoked a storm of fury against WikiLeaks and its allies.
This guy is an absolute threat, not just to American security, but to global security.
Well, I think Assange should be assassinated, actually. I think Obama should put out a contract and maybe use a drone or something.
Le Monde, in Paris, was charged with keeping the documents secure and with publishing them, just a few at a time.
WikiLeaks, against its basic instincts, allowed us to lead on this. Assange knew all too well the documents were far too sensitive. Effectively, and the Americans are right, they would endanger too many people. So, our best experts are deciding which names should not be revealed.
The cables revealed Hillary Clinton's call to her staff to collect intelligence on key officials of the United Nations.
The directive from Hillary Clinton merely revives a previous order from 2004. It's certainly one of the disclosures that most annoyed the Americans, because they're directly implicated. It was a command that clearly made the diplomats into spies, with specific instructions to get all kinds of information, from the mundane details to the more personal data, such as credit card numbers, even DNA samples. Now, whether they stole snippets of hair, they took champagne glasses where there were still traces of saliva, we can't say. But what we can say is the directive was sent to every embassy.
At the United Nations, strict orders were issued forbidding comment on the revelations. Globally, however, almost every government complained about WikiLeaks, including France.
Stealing information such as this, publishing it, and taking it out of context, well, I think it's an insult to our country. It's a terrible thing.
Although Muselier is not an advocate for excessive transparency, in 2003 at the United Nations, he listened as the Americans tried to convince the rest of the world to join in the war against Iraq. France was against it and opposed the Americans.
My colleagues, every statement I make today is backed up by sources, solid sources.
We knew he was lying about nuclear weapons of mass destruction.
But how did you know that?
Because of the intelligence that was available, or had been exchanged, and the cross-checks that different countries undertake. So we were quite convinced there were no nuclear weapons of mass destruction.
From a moral point of view, do you agree that it would have been right to give the public access to secret documents that in fact prove the danger posed by Iraq had been exaggerated?
I myself am not convinced that all this information should have been made available. I believe a powerful nation needs to have various sources of information to be able to make the right decision.
What do you expect at the end of the day with all this material?
Well, I hope it creates disincentives for engaging in immoral conduct in war. So disincentives for engaging in war crimes. In Iraq, in other places. It gives the victims of war in Iraq a sense of justice, a better understanding of how war goes and how war goes wrong. Possibly the most valuable thing to come out of it.
After the cable's furore, pressure on the WikiLeaks leader increased considerably.
120 people, according to media reports, headed up by a general just outside of the Pentagon who do nothing else but target us. Defense Intelligence Agency and FBI, internally called the WikiLeaks War Room. In the United States at the moment there is an attempt to get up an espionage prosecution against me and other people.
How do you sleep with that at night?
Well, you know, we publish a lot of information. We have a big impact on the world. So the United States intelligence community plus military is maybe 1.5 million people, so 120 is actually not so big.
Assange seemed relaxed about all the attention, bad or good. The media coverage had also brought him a legion of fans, particularly in academia.
What's been said is nice, so maybe other governments could, for the first time in the history of the world, there is, for this type of serious material, a real free press.
By the end of 2010, Assange had become the face of Wikileaks. Cracks within the organization deepened. For Daniel Domscheit-Berg, it was a betrayal of everything WikiLeaks stood for. He confronted Assange in an internet chat room and said, "You behave like some kind of emperor or slave trader." Assange replied, "You are suspended for 1 month, effective immediately."
He suspended me for being disloyal and insubordinate and stuff like this. So this is some kind of weird military terminology that he uses himself to deal with people he is working with.
You felt betrayed?
Yes, because I did not betray him, and I did never ever betray WikiLeaks.
In August 2010, in Sweden, 2 young women made allegations of sexual offences against Assange. A Swedish court charged him with rape. Those charges were first thrown out by one judge, but reinstated by another. When the story exploded onto the world's headlines, it was not about WikiLeaks, but about its founder's personal life.
WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has been arrested in London. Sweden is
In December 2010, Assange was arrested in London under an international arrest warrant, but was released on bail. Sweden is asking for his extradition to face questioning for the alleged offences, allegations he denies. Extradition hearings are ongoing in the UK. Could this be the end for WikiLeaks? Maybe not. The site is under constant attacks, but its hackers ensure it remains online. Assange is promising more revelations, and other whistleblowing sites have also sprung up.
WikiLeaks has, I think, triggered an enormously important movement in society. It's a cultural change that we see happening today, and this cultural change is more important than any single publication that has been made. There will be hundreds of websites that can accept documents and that just use the technology for accepting these submissions.
Political and military leaders around the world are not going to be able to relax anytime soon.